had this thing of warding off evil spirits when hung in windows and on doors. And that's why it was kind of brought into the houses back in the old days. And it also brought in good spirits into the house, because again, we're going back in time when you had dark winter nights where we don't have this light that we see nowadays, and these traditions were being held out. So a person who had holly on their door or on their window, it was a welcome for people's hospitality, I suppose, to bring people into their houses.
It's great to be back with another Environment Edge podcast, and you're very welcome to the show. Do you know the origin of holly and its many traditions?
Kevin O'Connell, Teagasc Forestry Development Officer, tells us all about the traditions and myths around the holly tree, from Roman times to pagans and druids.
I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Lenn.
Your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors. And we're back for another Environment Edge podcast number 93. And here we go.
Kevin, could you tell us a little bit about the origins of the holly tree? We're at that time of the year again.
Yeah, Deirdre, we're getting to that time where holly is sort of comes to the fore again. Christmas, I suppose, is the thing. Holly has sort of, it's very traditional in Ireland, and it just comes in under the pagan times in Ireland, I suppose, but also under Christian times in Ireland. Believe it or not, holly is the third most commonest tree in Ireland, which is an interesting fact. And its botanical name is Ilex aquifolium, and the aquifolium means pointed leaves. So the prickly holly leaf, I suppose, is the thing. But it's born in Breton times, back in ancient Irish times. It was regarded as one of the nobles of the forest, although not a big tree, holly, but it was regarded one of the noble trees. And it was very important in the manufacturing of, because it's a hard, dense timber, holly. It's a white wood for manufacturing chariots, spokes, and not so much the spokes, but the parts of the chariots. Was also used for spears and darts and so forth. So it has been associated. And again, under Brehon laws, if you cut down a holly bush, well, your fine was one milch cow. And if the holly bush didn't grow back again, you were fined for another 1.5 milch cows. So they did look on it as a particular good tree in that context. Or Quillen is the Irish for holly, and again, some place names around the country would have it like Glen Quillen and Glen Cullen, I suppose, and so forth. Thing about holly this time of the year, we all know that it can put on the red berries, and it's this brightness in the woods that we see it. We're kind of nowadays we're sort of as I say, we're kind of used to this dark greens in the woods this time of the year because we're so used to conifer trees being planted and so forth. But you're going back in traditional times when they're all deciduous trees. So this green holly stood out like a beacon in the wood, and particularly with red berries on it. And interestingly enough, trees with red berries are female trees, and trees without the berries are male trees. So we're called the dioecious, the above male and female trees. I had a lad in years ago with me here. He was going to put in a holly orchard, particularly for growing holly for berries. So I said, yeah, that's a good idea. I've heard people doing it. And he said, how did you figure out which were the female trees? And he says, what? he hadn't
I can
done
think
his
of a joke
research.
here, but I won't say it.
Yeah. No, but he didn't do his homework, like in the sense. So yeah, because I was going to ask him, is it a ratio 1-10? Male to thing and so forth. So it's important in that context. But again, it's that green tree at this time of the year. And there's all Celtic traditions as regards the king of the holly and the king of oak.
Kevin, just on the male female, how do you know? You just have to wait it out and see if it produced or not, is it?
It's basically that, yeah. And if you want to be producing holly, like in with your Christmas trees and your geese and so forth, the best way of all would be to take cuttings and put it on the stem of an older tree. Take older cuttings from a holly tree, because then you have an old tree on a young root base.
You grafted on, is it?
It's grafted on, and you would have you have a female tree, and you know it's of the graft would be of an age that it would be producing berries. Yeah.
Kevin, I've been out on farms recently, and there's no berries on the trees. Have the birds taken them all, or? Like in
possibly some with a colder
smell,
but there's a lot of, again, they have to be an age to put berries on.
All right, okay.
And also to, again, that is it a female or a male tree that you're looking at?
We
That's
have a good
yeah.
harvest this year at home now. There's plenty
Have
of ground,
you?
plenty of
I'll
berries.
Yeah.
get some of them off you then, Carl.
But
Good
again, there's
price.
the old tradition like of it there. But it had back in the day, it had things like repelling lightning when you planted one close to the house. And under some traditions, if you plant a holly close to the house, it said it'd repel that lightning. But then in other traditions, it said if you have a holly bush close to your house, female people in the house couldn't conceive. So there was a bit of conflict there in that context. But it had this thing of warding off evil spirits when hung in windows and on doors. And that's why it was kind of brought into the houses and back in the old days. And it also brought in good spirits into the house because, again, we're going back in time when you have dark winter nights where we don't have this light that we see nowadays. And these traditions were being held out. So a person who had holly on their door or on their window, it was a welcome for people's hospitality, I suppose, to bring people into their houses. When you bring in the Christian, they were added their little bit to it as well in the concept of too that the crown of thorns is supposed to be on Christ, where it's made from holly, and initially the berries were white, but because of the blood of Christ they turned red and stayed red forevermore. And in some literature will say that holly comes from a holy tree, but there's an argument to say that actually it's an Indo-European word meaning thorny tree as opposed to a holy tree. So there's a lot of this stuff coming on. But it has a good tradition in Ireland, and the famous one we have, I suppose, is the wren boys, because traditionally they would have had a holly bush, and the wren tied to the holly bush as they went around on their tours on Stephen's Day. And I suppose the poor old wren got a bad press because he was supposed to have made the noise that gave away St. Stephen's hiding place. So forevermore it was being hunted down on St. Stephen's Day. But there was also then again women in the house, particularly younger women, if they put the berries of hollies under their pillow, they would dream of their future husband. And that's an Irish tradition, but it also is you see it in England as well. There was a similar tradition as that. And for some reason, there's this thing of hitting people with holly bushes, because apparently when you bleed from the holly bush, the prickly parts, it sort of purified you in the sense that you were bleeding in some form of a purification. So there's a lot of traditions tied around holly. One thing, however, the thing was that you never brought holly into the house before Christmas Eve. It was part of the tradition, and you only took it out at the feast of the Epiphany, which was the 6th of January. And if you kept your holly, then people used to keep it back in the day and use it for lighting the fire on Shrove Tuesday for making the pancakes. So it was sort of kind of a circular economy, I suppose, in its time, you know. But again, it's in Ireland. Again, holly and indeed ivy were the main kind of greenery that we brought into our houses.
Have they got a long lifespan,
Oh,
the holly
yeah,
trees?
holly has a long lifetime. Yeah, and again, a good example. You're talking, you could be up to 300 to 500 years plus. If you just look at the stem on them in the wood, it's a very valuable tree. Like, we don't see the big trees of holly anymore, but it was used for a lot of furniture making. Not so much the construction, but adding adornment to furniture, particularly inlays and stuff like that. Another use of it was for, the piano keys. Instead of ebony, which you couldn't get, you used holly. And holly, again, it's a white wood, but you could stain up dark, and it's got the same sort of density and weight as the ebony. Again, it's a valuable tree both from a wildlife point of view, as the berries that we all know, for birds this time of the year, but also the flowers for bees back in the early spring. They have a small white flower. So yeah, it is and the tradition of it still lives on. We all see that. It's like, as I say, you're traveling the countryside there, they're looking for a bit of holly.
Yeah, I'm going to call now.
So
You're
everyone
locking the
wants
gates.
wants a bit of holly. So it's a thing. And again, if you go back in the old hymns, the holly and the ivy, of course, were there, and you have the the deck the halls with boughs of holly and so forth.
Deirdre
So
was singing that before you came on. She might
I'd
give us a
say
blast
that.
of it,
I'd
yeah.
say
La,
that.
la, la, la. Yeah.
So that's basically our holly.
It's
It's an
notoriously
important tree.
slow to grow, though, Kevin, isn't it?
It is. It's a slow tree.
Yeah.
It's like it's very shade tolerant. That's why you kind of find it as an understory in woodlands and so forth, and particularly associated with our oak woodlands and that.
Is anyone growing it? I presume people are growing it to sell it in big quantities, are they? Or is it just,
There are some people who would be, as I say, a holly orchard for want of a better expression. But yeah, there would be some people producing it. But of course, you must look. There's over 200 different varieties of holly,
okay,
and you're seeing
yeah.
it coming in, a lot of variegated holly that's coming in, and so on and so forth. And back traditionally, then in this time of the year, it was as a fodder crop for cattle, livestock. Holly was given to them. And if you look the way holly grows, again, it's very spiky, but in the wood and so forth, because if it's been nibbled on by livestock, the tree itself will actually produce these spiky leaves. Whereas you go further up on the tree, the leaves are not as spiky as well because there's no browsing or grazing pressure on them up there. So yeah, it has been used traditionally as a fodder for this time of the year for cattle.
And I know Catriona often talks about putting in hedgerows, that holly is a nice bit to put into it. Um, I just from what you're talking, there's so many species, and I assume we've imported species, but there is Irish holly, I suppose. These are going back years and years.
Oh yeah, well most what you see in the countryside here now is predominantly native,
Native,
indigenous holly. Yeah,
and that's the
yeah,
one to go for to
yeah,
put in it.
yeah. An interesting one there. You talk about holly in the hedgerows as regards its biodiversity and its native tree, but there's a good tradition actually coming from Scotland that when they cut their hedges, particularly hedges with holly, they'd leave the holly trees grow on, and of course that had biodiversity value. Now we're going back in time here, but it also was as a deterrent for witches
Right.
because it was thought that witches ran across the top of the hedges, and if you had a holly tree, they couldn't keep running on your hedge. They had to get down off the holly bushes. So this was one of the traditions. Again, it's a Scottish one, by the way.
It kind of goes back to your pagans and druids
Oh yeah,
years ago. That
it's all
evil
there
spirits.
because you're looking at, as I said, the big old one. And the Celtic time was the king of holly and the king of oak, and they represented the winter and the summer solstice.
It's not good for dogs, is it, or humans? It's the berry is toxic, isn't it?
Berries, toxic's all right, but obviously birds can
Birds can eat it.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
hygiene.
yeah.
I was very interested when you said it was used for chariot production, and
For the
particularly,
shafts, yeah.
yeah, but like obviously when I think chariots, I think of ancient Rome, and it goes back to what you were talking about, the Christ and the cross and the holly and all that kind of stuff. And I was looking up stuff before I was talking to you, and you mentioned the festival that the Romans had for the god of agriculture, Saturn. I think I
Yeah,
can't remember what you call it, Saturna or something like that.
Saturnalia, yeah.
And
Something like
the Romans used to give each other holly between the 17th and 23rd December as gifts.
yeah, holly and laurel would be there, and evergreens and things. Yeah, it was part of the festivals back then. Yeah, there was a lot of festivals tied in around this time of the year. Sure, look at Newgrange. I mean,
Yeah,
we all look at Newgrange with the winter solstice rather. But there was other parts of. There's a place in Kilkenny, the name escapes me at the moment, that has a similar thing as Newgrange.
It's
Not
not
grow,
grow,
yeah,
it's called,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But we are familiar with Stonehenge in England, but there would have been, and that's again lined with the winter solstice, but there would have been lots of henges in Ireland that were made from wood, which are lost now, obviously, through times. And again, they would have been associated with the winter and these or summer solstice. So there's big traditions there. Okay, yeah.
Myself and Cahill were talking about it earlier, on a couple of visits that we've been on within Kilkenny and Wexford. There are bunches of holly hanging up in sheds. And is there any, it's used as a preventative for ringworm on some farms. Would there be any truth in that, or is it another old wives' tale?
Going to be quite on this one because it only came to me recently too and like you, I did a little bit of research on it.
The farmers swear by it now, and
Well,
it's usually the older generation of farmers that hang it.
look, as the man says, if it works for you, it works for you. That's the way I'd be looking at it. I
Whatever
wouldn't be
rocks your
knocking
boat.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose it'd be interesting to if anyone did some more studies on that. I'm sure there are chemical components within the holly that maybe are given off. I do know that ivy can be beneficial. Leaves of ivy and so forth can be beneficial in some instances for people with breathing problems and so on and so forth. But again, there's lots of old tales associated with it, you know.
I'd say the timber, ringworm fungus likes timber, so I assume it heads for the holly.
Possibly within that, yeah.
But you'd also have timber lats in your shed, so I'd say as a disclaimer, make sure you disinfect your sheds well. That's the big thing.
That would be a thing. Yeah. But apparently back in the day, you weren't allowed, or you shouldn't have drive cattle with a holly bush.
Okay.
Holly stick.
Why is that, or what's the?
It was just that it was regarded as bad luck and not good for the cattle itself, like, you know, that they wouldn't thrive or whatever, you know. So there was some reason for it in that. And again, another one is that you shouldn't clean your chimney. Again, we're going back in the day with holly because it was regarded as that sacred tree or noble tree that you shouldn't degrade it as such. So there's loads of stuff, and every part of the country has its own little traditions around associated with it and so forth, you know.
Well, Kevin, I actually found this conversation this week and the last couple of weeks with you on the Christmas tree as well hugely interesting and entertaining, and I've definitely learned a huge amount from you, and I thought it was a really interesting couple of podcasts with you, and I'd just like to thank you for joining us on the podcast, and myself and Deirdre want to wish you a very, very happy Christmas and hope you have a great break.
Thanks very much, Cathal and Deirdre. It was actually a pleasure doing it with you. Happy Christmas to you.
You too. So there you have it. Tune in next time to hear more interesting chats and discussion. We would like to wish you all a very happy and peaceful Christmas and look forward to chatting to you in the new year.
Myself and Deirdre will be back in 2 weeks' time, but do give us a review on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to the Environment Edge podcast.